All right. Hey, how you doing? So, I have a petition and literally. Do this. Yeah. Yeah. And we're saying. That's all I need is to send.
Testing, testing, testing.
Thank you very much.
Nervous
Why?
tonight. I'm nervous.
Why?
I'm out of practice.
We don't believe you.
I'm out of practice. Come on in, have a seat, grab yourself a coffee, and there's some baked goods back there if you haven't already.
Thanks.
It's great to see you. Nice to see you this evening. Tsahanup tonight. My name is Tsahanup. It's a name that's kicked around these parts for a very long time. Name that I got from my father, Sewi Suit's uncle, who lived on the Columbia side of our territory, which just is an indication of the expanse of our territory in Bellingham and through the southern Gulf Islands. Adam Olson's my name. If you didn't recognize me, I've been recuperating from 20 years in elected office by immediately joining the staff in Sartland First Nation and sitting and moving one seat over at the table and working with my sister and with my relatives in First Nations politics, or the administrative side of First Nations politics. I successfully deeped a nomination for chief in the last month and a bit. It was my sister nominated me, and I decided that wasn't quite the time. So my uncle Curtis Olson, Talqueelam's his name. He carries the name of my grandfather. He was elected chief of Sartlik, and we've got a new chief and council that we're going to be swearing in. So working in politics, but just not on the Crown side, the Indigenous side. It's an interesting sound. So welcome this evening, and it's incredible to have the leader of the BC Greens, Emily Lowan, here with us this evening, and the MLA for Saanich North and the Islands, Rob Botterell, who's right here. And I was considering just turning this into a circle and just having a conversation so we could all look at each other, and then too many of you showed up and made that impractical. So we're going to leave it in the format that we have. Basically, this evening it's going to be pretty relaxed. We're going to have MLA Rob come on up and talk about well, whatever he's going to talk about. He told me he had speechwriters working all day today. So as you can see, it looks like a receipt or a bookmark or something. And then Emily's going to speak, and then we're going to do some Q&A, some questions and answers. I've got some questions.
You got it.
It's fine. And Emily's got some answers. So there we go. Welcome.
Thank you.
How's everybody this evening? Good? Rob.
Well, it's great to see you here tonight, and I just really want to thank you for coming out tonight to meet our amazing new leader, Emily Lowan. Thing that I see everywhere I go is that the demographic is changing, and that there's a real presence in the party, and a real energy that we haven't seen for a long time, which is really cool. And the thing about it for me is MLA for this riding is just looking at issues and how we can tackle them together, and really getting a lot of traction with government. And I think that's partly because they're saying, holy smokes, we got to deal with these issues, and we've got to make ourselves look good. But what they're really reacting to is the fact that we have a leader who is laying it out really clearly, and the NDP don't know what to do. It's just great. and because they sort of were cruising along, and then Emily and Jeremy and I get along so well, and we keep making our presence felt in different ways. So they're sort of getting it, in all different ways from all sides. And And so through the fall, I've reflected, I'm about a year into it. So I've reflected on, when I was talking to Adam about running and, you know, what were some of the things to watch out for when I got elected. And I was asked a couple of weeks ago, and I've mentioned this to a couple of you, but I'm gonna mention it again because it's quite indicative. So we said, well, this fellow said to me, Rob, well, so what did Adam forget to mention? Like, I mean, you know, you're a year into it, you've, you know, and said, well, you know, he talked about the legislative process and he talked all sorts of great advice. Well, what was something that he didn't tell you about that was really positive? And I said, well, last Christmas and this Christmas, the speaker came to me and asked me to be the Santa for the legislature. And that was just fabulous. So I get, you know, all dressed up and you know, and you know, you're coming from this.
He can't keep.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And then the I mean, not to be a downer, but then the item that they said, okay, well, what was the worst thing he never told you about? Well, he never told me that I would be sitting next to Dallas Brody, the leader of One BC, every day that I'm in the legislature. But I'm having some fun with that, and you know, because I can lean over into the camera angle, and if you lean over and then she's saying something outrageous and horrific, as she usually does every chance she gets, we go, then the cameraman has to sort of, or woman has to get it moved out of the way. And then I started to turn my chair, and anyway, it's a lot of fun in the circumstances. In this riding, we're working so hard on healthcare, on getting primary care going, and we've had Josie Osborne out here, and we've had last night, because I'm on instructions to expand our influence. So I headed south of my traditional territory into Saanich. And we made Shoreline, and I had made a presentation to the council there about opening a third clinic on the peninsula. And you know, I'm not, there's nothing underhand about this. I phoned up Lana Popham, the minister, and I said, you know, I'm gonna make this presentation. You're welcome to come along, but I want you to know what I'm up to, which is that I'm working on that becoming another green riding. And so she laughed. We're doing lots of work on housing, and tomorrow morning I'll be on CBC talking about old growth and forestry and the recent arrests at Ferry Creek, which is a that we're tackling in the wall brand, and you know, just really bringing home the fact that this is a government that knows how to announce things, but they don't know how to deliver them. And that's part of our job. Anyway, I'm going on way too long because you're here tonight, I hope, to hear from Emily, and you know, we're getting ready to make some fairly big moves in a good way to have a lot more Greens in the legislature. And between Jeremy and Emily and I, we're all working together to make that happen. So without further ado, I want you to go over and sign up for the volunteer table. We'll just take a 10-minute break. But we are, if you haven't signed up, or if I can convince you, we really are wanting to build the team and get everything ready for 2026, because EB's a pretty, he has a misapprehension of his chances of getting, winning an election. And then the Conservatives are in such chaos that he might just go, oh, well, let's just have an election. So it should be a really exciting 2026. And I just really would encourage you, if you can help out or sign up, and we can build you into our work to get ready. So that's my speech that I spent 3 days writing. But I want to finish by just saying how really appreciative I am for the work and your participation and being here tonight. this is a pretty exciting time for the Greens, and we're gonna make some people really happy when they get to vote Green in the next election, and then suddenly we have 5 or 10 Green MLAs to really change things up. So thank you, and over to you.
Good evening, everyone. This is I was counting on my way over here, our 20th tour stop. Robin, give it up for yourselves for being here. At the bitter end, when my voice is, doesn't sound like itself, but, bear with me as I croak through the question period. Yeah, so it's been about 2 weeks, and we called this journey Oligarchs Tour. So I want to explain what that means. Essentially, we started out this campaign with this slogan of fight the oligarchs, fund our future, because nothing will ever change if we continue to let a small handful of big polluters hoard more and more of the wealth each and every year. And, I'm not talking about the people that have maybe a second home or a high salary. I'm talking about the 600 individuals in BC who own the industry and have a year-round ticket into Premier EV's office. And I think zooming out for a moment, I want to give a shout out to Elizabeth May, who couldn't be here with us this evening, but she really politicized me in and around Trump's first election, and because of her, I dove headfirst into climate organizing. And in those early days, I recognized a truth that I still hold about a decade later, that all the crises that we're facing today, the climate crisis, the affordability crisis, housing, toxic drugs, all hold the core of the same story, that we are in a rigged, ruthless battle for power between billionaires, their vested political interests, and the rest of us who are just trying to get by. And so I toured the province with that in mind. And I wanted to put a spotlight on what corporate resource theft actually looks like. How does it impact the communities that are on the front line of this antiquated boom and bust economy? And what are people doing to reclaim their economy and their livelihoods? So we started in the belly of the beast on Vancouver's Billionaires Row, in Evie's own riding, I might add. And these are the houses that belong to BC's biggest wealth hoarders, right? I'm thinking of certain individuals like Lululemon's Chip Wilson, who is now a right-wing blogger and real estate mogul. And we ran every single intercom on this charming little avenue along the seaside. Somewhat predictably, no one was home. So, I guess we can imagine that they're out there, solving the problems that they created in BC. But I guess jokes aside, we set off to ask the people of BC, who's the billionaire menace in your backyard, and what are you doing to reclaim your power and create a community that truly serves your needs, that generates jobs and actual prosperity. So we started out in Prince George, which is really ground zero of forestry collapse, where companies like Canfor came in, stripped the forests, and left hundreds, if not thousands, of workers in the lurch. And this is the kind of company that turns on a dime when the profit margins shift, and they trucked all of their operations, pretty much all of their operations, down to the southeast of the United States, and left hundreds of workers in the lurch. And so we were learning from the union representatives that were organizing to take back their industry with sustainable forestry, with strategies like thinning like community managed forests, and actually expropriating closed mills. And so these are inspiring examples of, you know, what it can look like when communities take their future into their own hands. And yeah, we then from there hopped over to Hazelton, over on Gixen territories, and met with many of the hereditary chiefs that are fighting against the Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline and the Silasms terminal, which is going to be fast-tracked by David Eby, the fracked gas pipeline, backed by American oligarchs in Trump's inner circle. And so, you know, it was fascinating to go to communities like Kitimat, you know, who are just south of the Gixan, who have lived the experience of LNG Canada Phase 1, who now experience a 74% increase in the rates of asthma in their community because of the flaring. And you know what? I was talking to local councillors in the region, and Kitimat, you know, the wealth ain't trickling down. There's no new bus routes. There's no new businesses. The schools are the same. And, you know, the local councillors are dealing with increases in housing costs and even more fragmented social safety net. And I think that's really the truth across the board. You know, this wealth that the government peddles and sells communities on, you know, it gets sucked up and flies off to foreign tax havens and, you know, their luxury bunkers overseas. And yeah, I think many of the chiefs and leadership that I spoke with as well, you know, spelled it out. You know, they're bearing all of the risk for largely American equity to run loose in their community. But you know, amongst all of that and all of that depressing sort of reality, you know, I'm found examples like Sikadike on Gixan lands, where the Gixan community have come together to build affordable housing to house many families in the region. And they're just building a new daycare that's like, you know, right there at the heart of the community. There's a school gym with rooftop solar that powers the community. And they have access now to fresh produce year round, nutritious food, because they're growing microgreens and have like this amazing mushroom contraption. and you know, they're just opening a public facility to process local meat and, you know, make sausage, so they have full freezers through the winter. And so, you know, these were the kind of inspiring examples of communities really taking their future into their own hands. And I think this is what happens when community is actually planned by people and not by faraway developers and corporations that are driven solely by profit. We then went to Prince Rupert. And I don't know if you know Jim Pattison, but he's a bit of a household name, obviously in BC, but especially in Prince Rupert, because in and around the 80s, you know, deregulation caused massive, and you know, what do the oligarchs do when there's a bust in the market? They go in and they buy everything up to consolidate their control. And that's exactly what happened in the 90s. And so now all of the fish off the coast of Prince Rupert goes 90% overseas. So the people that live in Prince Rupert can't buy their own fish. And they are one of the most food insecure regions in all of BC and face the highest rate of child poverty. But you know, it was inspiring to see that some nations and community groups are actually starting to claw back those licenses from Jimmy Pattison and are you know, really pushing on things like an owner-operated model to quash this foreign ownership. And then seeing Natalie in the room, you know, your home base of Pemberton and Whistler, when we went over to the interior, we realized that so many of these resorts that, you know, are kind of maybe glimmery in our mind's eye are actually owned by a bunch of evil tycoons that screw over their workers at every turn. And so we were meeting with many of those folks, you know, and we'll be going up to Whistler very soon to meet some Vale haters, which I'm very excited about. You know, and these are, and that's the kind of consolidation of control where these owners like Vale just come in and treat these towns like their personal dumping ground and playground, and constantly mistreat their workers. And in the Okanagan, we heard all about vineyard baron Anthony von Mandel, who actually founded Mike's Hard Lemonade. So, you know, big name. And he's pushing up land prices and pushing out small businesses in the process. But when we were in that same region, we stumbled across spunky characters like Chase at Edison Motors in Golden, who, after waiting on Elon Musk's electric industrial hauling truck for over 5 years, Chase said, "Enough of this noise, I'm gonna just build my own," which is the kind of attitude I think we need. And you know, it was through sheer grit and determination that he barreled through a lot of government red tape and continues to face challenges despite being, you know, a remarkable local innovator. And so, you know, he gave me a hat that says "Stealing Elon's Idea, Edison Motors," and they're not for sale legally anymore because the lawyers got mad at that, Elon's lawyers specifically. But you know, it's so incredible to see that kind of spunk and determination from small businesses across BC who are truly the future of our clean energy and yeah, a sustainable economy. But you know, I think the real crux of this tour has been, you know, meeting with communities, building power on the ground, and yeah, creating that grassroots spirit that I think will really twist the NDP's arm in upcoming negotiations and in the next election. Because frankly, they've gotten pretty lazy building they don't really have a movement on the ground. And it's been incredible to see so many people just pack town halls all across this province, and I hope to do as many laps as humanly possible as my voice permits with endurance. But yeah, I think, you know, another thing, the NDP has just no political imagination. They're not on the ground. They're not asking communities what solutions they could be scaling to benefit their daily lives. You know, they're captured by a revolving door of corporate lobbyists, and they're very sensitive to being called corporate captured. And they're just, you know, blindly following the same rip it and ship it model of extraction that got us into this mess. Quite literally copying Christy Clark's 2013 plan. And you know, we need out, right? Like, it feels like BC, we're at our breaking point on so many fronts. And the government claims it's broke, that we don't have money to fund our future. And that's just not true. And so, you know, I got together some smart people and we did some math. And you know, we looked at some examples, like an ultra wealthy fairness tax, which is what is happening in California right now. So we looked at a one-time 10% tax on the wealthiest in our society, the centimillionaires and billionaires in BC. And this year alone, that would raise over $13 billion. I think that's the size of the deficit. But you know, we could spend down that debt, and it's like social housing at scale, community healthcare centers, and free transit, and fast free transit. And you know, I think all of this sounds great, right? But we need a movement to make it real. We need a movement to build the political will and the political power to realize those solutions. So we have the seats and the leverage to make this a real possibility. And I think, as Rob was saying, you know, we're on track to hold the balance of power in the next election. And when we have that balance of power, I think, you know, it must be our top priority to force proportional representation. Yeah, so, you know, I think you're all familiar, but you know, if we had 20% of the vote, which I think we're also on track for, we would have 20% of the seats in the legislature. The Greens would be holding court no matter who the government is. They would have to cooperate and negotiate with us. So let's fight for that future together. I think we can build an intergenerational movement that is strong enough to take on these billionaires and big polluters, that's strong enough to build the future that we deserve, that our children deserve, that our grandchildren deserve. And I think that is an affordable future that respects Indigenous rights and respects our planetary boundaries. I think our time has come, folks. Like, call me naive and optimistic, but let's do it.
Sit down, or do you want to stand?
Yeah.
So, thank you. Thank you for coming and hanging out with Sydney. This is just the demographic of Sydney. So, and the Southern Gulf Islands. So this is the youngest crowd in Sydney. So when Rob was saying that everywhere you've gone, you've got the youngest crowds, this is it in Sydney. So
My oldest crowd. Bless you all.
no, but you know what? Like, it is inspiring because I was also inspired by Elizabeth May when she came rolling into town back in the 08 times, and you know, it's incredible to know that the leadership that she's shown over the years consistently drew me in, drew so many others in. And you mentioned that it was inspirational to you, and it's a really important legacy that she's helped to build, but that you get to help carry forward. And when you know, we've always talked about being able to connect with the next generation of Greens, and it's a really important piece to recognize the BC Greens have elected the next generation of Greens to lead the party. And that is because of folks like you. And I'm you know, I want to recognize the number of doors that have been knocked on in this room for the Greens. You know, I say, join the volunteer list. All of these people are on the volunteer list, or the vast majority anyways, the vast majority. So I just want to raise my hands that we've spent the last decade together, and I want to just really thank you for creating a space for this party to be able to know that there is a spot that supports people who are willing to stand up and speak truth to power every day in the legislature, every day on the street. And so I think we should give the crowd a round of applause. They said to me, they said, Adam, she's talking about fighting oligarchs. What are you going to do about that? You have to do something about that. This new leader can't talk about fighting. I don't know why people want to protect the oligarchs. Anyway, there was this meme that I saw that said oligarchs are not contributing to society, they're extracting from it. Yeah. And you know, one of the things that I noticed immediately was that your message was direct in ways that Sonia and I wasn't, but it was the same. We were saying very, very similar things about this extractive resource colony that was established in the 1800s around the gold rush, or the mid 1800s around the gold rush, but has continued in our mindset in this province that it's okay to defend completely and totally unsustainable extractive behaviors that are totally deleterious to the communities that that this behavior is happening. And so I really appreciate the fact that you picked that up and you actually said it in a much more blunt, much more straightforward, much clearer way than signing out the way you'll articulate it. I never said that to you, but in public, but I just want you to know that it is so appreciated because it is going directly to the heart of what our problem is. And that is that they can hire the lobbyists to completely flood the halls. It's true, folks, it happens. And manipulate the outcomes in there so that our politicians are not making those decisions in a way that's not polluted and corrupted by that force.
Well, thank you to you and Sonia for paving the way. You know, you walked so I
It's a
could
gravel road. It's
a little gravelly.
yeah, we want to recharge the aquifer. It feels gravelly, does it? Like you're walking on bare feet in gravel, is that what it feels like?
I mean, what doesn't? Like, you know, everything is a learning curve, and I'm loving the ride, and that's what counts. But yeah, you set that course, and you really took the party in a new direction that was, you know, focused on well-being and taking power away from these corporations that are making our lives materially worse in every way. And I think part of the intention with such a blunt slogan was, you know, I looked at the party and I was like, we need, you know, I think so many of my friends would want to feel at home here, would want to spend, you know, volunteer hours, door knocking, but they need to feel represented. And that only happens when there's just, you know, a tidal wave of young people coming into the party. And so I wanted a slogan, you know, a campaign run that really, you know, shot to the heart and you know, would galvanize people in my generation. And so I think we're doing that. It's a work in progress, and you know, I'm thrilled to see, you know, the sheer numbers of people under 30 that signed up to become active members of the party. And if you come out on the Victoria rally on the 14th, I think many of them will be there.
So the Fight the Oligarchs, it started here in, I did mention in the gold rush time, it was Fight the Monarchs at that time. Come on, folks. Yeah.
Okay.
But it was the HBC was the corporate interest that was here. And we just recently saw the death, you know, the very public death of the Hudson's Bay Corporation. And people had lots of, I think, probably emotional feelings about that because it was the cornerstone of a lot of the malls, and the HBC had a long history. But when I tie it back to the resource colony, it's important to understand the patterns, and the pattern that you identified in your campaign is actually the pattern of British Columbia. It was the HBC that when they first got here was given 10 years to settle and to divide the land up and distribute it on behalf of the crown. So the crown is turned to the corporations, to the powerful to do the work that they're doing, and that's exactly what we see here. And what has it been? It's industry ever since. So I also want to point out Chase and Edison has done something really interesting because he's the CEO of an innovative company, Edison Motors, and he was able to do something that you were able to do in the campaign, and that was kind of take what he's good at, building a business, with what he's also good at, getting in front of a camera and talking about it and capturing people. Talk about the difference that you have in terms of using social media and using tools that in an effective way, not just standing and talking to it, but in an interesting way to be able to get the message out to more and more people.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I spent about 3 years in civil society after finishing my program at UVic. You know, and I was working at Climate Action Network Canada, and so I ended up really sort of studying all of the different sort of movement organizations and yeah, all the groups that help us protest in BC and across Canada. And I noticed that, the most effective organizations had really harnessed social media in a compelling way to drive a committed volunteer base. And so I kind of just replicated that model in the campaign, and it all felt like a big experiment. When I posted my first video, I had no idea if 50 people were gonna like it or 500, and it turns out there's an appetite in the many thousands for this message and for our party. And so yeah, it's about building the skills and bringing in people in the room like Tom over there is on his phone. He's recording. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Tom because he revolutionized our campaign. It wouldn't have worked without him at all. And yeah, so he edits the videos and he brings in headlines. He makes it, and creates these 2-minute masterpieces in my opinion. And so stay tuned for more tour content coming your way. But yeah, it's exciting to sort of see how social media can be used to cast a wide net. And how we then I sort of have a second filter of relational organizing, because people often just like mindlessly interact with content on their phone. They'll like things, they'll send it to people, but that's not necessarily getting you volunteers. And so that's what I realized in the campaign as well. You need to message people personally. You need to get people in the door who are activating and calling their friends and pulling out a real relational approach.
One of the things that social media has done, and as you just noted, is it's made the action on the phone rather than the action in society. So really partnering that up with, I love that video, to I'm gonna knock on 100 doors with you this weekend, right? And that's a different, and that is a different thing. And in fact, volunteerism in every way is going down. So a lot of the most successful Democrats down in the States right now, when they talk about their campaigns, they are door knocking campaigns. They are going back to the personal connections, because there's so much fake garbage on the phone that when you're scrolling or in Facebook, you don't know if it's AI generated or if it's real. And so the only way that we're going to actually be able to tell, is it really Emily, is if you actually really just have that personal interaction. And so I think that it's really, really critical, this tour that you're on, and then the next, and I know it sucks for me to say this because you haven't finished this tour yet, but I'm gonna say it, the next tour that you're on, and the next tour that you're on. Well, because you know what Rob mentioned, he sits next to Dallas Brody. I sat next to John Rustad. If he paid attention, he would have seen the pattern and he probably wouldn't put his name forward. But the seat I vacated was next to one of the anyway. But John said something to me. John said something to me in the middle of the spring of 2024. And that was like, he was on his second tour. And he was using, I think he was using MLA resources to do, anyway. He said, the rooms that I was in that had 12 people have 100 people now at them. Right? And then he started to go again. He came back from another tour. And he said, those same places that I was at with 100 people, it's now 200 people. They're now bustling. So it really is about persistence and going back and talking to the people that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm gonna be taking a page out of Rustad's book for sure, and doing as many laps as possible.
Come on, Tom, he wasn't even recording that. Oh, it's right here. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure can. Yeah.
Emily, where do you plan on running this next election?
So he's asking
It's a
where
secret.
Emily plans on running. Yeah, it's a secret.
I will run somewhere, and I can't tell you yet, but we are also, the jury's out. Like, we're doing polling in the new year to see, how I land in different ridings, and no final decisions yet.
Good,
In the correct place.
that's the way they go do it. ran campaigns myself. And Adam, I liked Adam right from the get-go, the first time I ever met him. And because he said something very important. You have to get out and door knock.
Yeah.
And I've run campaigns. And the other thing, and I'm not being critical, but I was very, very disappointed at the quality of the people who were running for the Greens. The last time I was down at the, I think it was at the Idlewise Club.
Right.
And
Well,
well, I'll tell you why.
just hold on one second, Jim. We're gonna talk to her about candidates and candidate recruiting. Going around and knocking on doors and talking to people in rooms like this is one thing. Recruiting candidates, that's a whole other ball of wax. What do you think? What do you think about that?
I have so many schemes to recruit candidates. It's honestly, it's been very fun so far. But yeah, you know, as we look at sort of the next era for the Greens being, you know, youth-centered, intergenerational, the real workers' party, you know, an anti-corporate party, I'm looking for people who are like, you know, I'm thinking of like Powell River. If there was some sort of magic ex-forestry kind of socialist guy that you know, could really galvanize people in those more working class neighborhoods. I think that would, you know, really help bridge demographics and yeah, some of those ridings like Gibson's and Sunshine Coast. Yeah, I have some really exciting candidates on the horizon that, you know, aren't public yet, but yeah, it's been part like outreach and sort of looking at who has a platform, who is well connected in the community, who is, you know, really doing the work on the ground. Because, you know, so often I think we can get caught up on like, oh, who has a, you know, a tenured professor gig somewhere. They're not out there knocking doors. That's going to be your laziest candidate. I'm sorry, half the time.
Andrew knocks on a lot of doors.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
Okay.
But you know, it's essential that we find candidates that, you know, really want to do that level of community engagement and yeah, work on the ground.
Awesome.
It's early days yet, but I'm wondering if by any remote chance, on your tour, if there was any signs of emergence in the interiors, away from the southern coastal areas, of the younger generations being followers. Did they show up as yet? I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't much as yet in those communities, but do tell me anyway.
Yeah, my favorite little nugget is in Kamloops. I was leaving our coffee hour that morning. It was a weekday, and some flustered high school boys came running in. And we're like, oh, you're finished, you're finished. They had skipped school to be there. And, you know, and then I was like, oh, but you know, I have to go now, but there's a pizza party later tonight. And they came to that and they brought more of their friends. And so, you know, we had a packed room in Kamloops, and, you know, there was definitely like older generations there, people who had, you know, spent a lot of time in the riding association. But I want to say a good quarter of the room were young people and were brand new to the party. So I thought that was really inspiring. And it was, yeah, similar in Kelowna, demographic wise. It felt like there was real emergence there. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to visiting those ridings again and again. Penticton was a real highlight as well. We had a youth organizer who, yeah, is amazing. I think he's in his early 20s and just was like, yeah, I'll organize you like a brewery pub night. He invited like all of his friends, incredibly well connected. And there was like half of local council there. It was like mostly under 40. It was, yeah, I think there was around 40-ish people there in Penticton, which now may be a swing riding with Amelia Boltby becoming independent. So, yeah.
All right, we'll go, oh, actually, we're gonna come here to Tom, then we'll go in the back. Tom,
I do love your passion and it's just wonderful, but just last Friday at the Friday lunch on Salt Spring, one of our older volunteers expressed his disappointment about your use of the F-bomb on your Facebook page or something along those lines. I didn't see it myself. So combine the passion with a little bit of
your salty language.
yes.
Emily.
This is how we're gonna get young people, guys. Come on, it's not that big of a deal. No, I appreciate, you know, decorum. And it wasn't in the press release. So this, you know, this was this was on my social media, and it was, you know, it brought a lot of people in. And I think, you know, as you know, I take up leadership. It's important that we make like young and working class people feel safe, and like this is their new political home. And in such a moment of total insanity, where Carney and Danielle Smith are steamrolling coastal First Nations rights in just a complete abuse of power, signing that MOU, potentially repealing a tanker ban that has been in place since the 70s, effectively.
under.
And UNDRIP, DRIPA here in BC. And so, you know, moments like that, I think, you know, we need moral clarity around, and sometimes that's, you know, it demands an outlet for rage.
I'll just say it's exactly what I was feeling. And I articulated it on CBC and saying, you know, it basically, Mark Carney knew that all he had to do was agree with Danielle Smith and put the First Nations people in front of him and in between him and Alberta. And he knew that he could have a very successful, he could have a very successful press announcement. And what it meant was that the First Nations on the coast that have fought that tanker ban and won, and fought that tanker ban and won, and fought for that tanker ban and won, are now gonna have to fight for that tanker ban and win again. And they're gonna have to go back and an extraordinary amount of time and money and effort and cognitive power and organizing power and distracting from the issues that they should be focused on in their communities to do something that they've already done again and again and again. And so, you know, I think that I think what you articulated was exactly what I was feeling. And so, you know, I think to Tom's point is that there's no doubt that there's going to be people that are like, now that you shouldn't be saying that at any time. However, if it lands and people are feeling it, then it's a genuine feeling for them. Then you've been successful in the use of that turn of phrase, a specific one that you used. However, if you're out there just dropping it all over the place, and you know it starts to lose its effect. So it really is about efficacy, right?
Yeah. I get like one F-bomb a year. How's that?
Well, no, you get as many F-bombs as the public agree. And so this is part of the job, right? Is to figure out where that balance is and to understand where the line is and stay very close to it and venture over it every now and then and pull back. And I never stepped across it. However, I know that I also made people uncomfortable in different ways. So, you know, back here.
Well, since I've got the microphone, can I just suggest the F-bomb be used BoJack Horseman style, just a permanent death of a relationship? Anyway, nobody gets that reference. My name is Nathaniel Torchito. This was for Rob, actually, but if any of you can answer it as well. Amongst the many battlegrounds of BC right now with extractions, there's also the question of mental health, which the Conservatives, you know, delicately put out as we should jail all the people with mental health issues and lock them away. And Effie said, I agree, we should do that, but in a nice way, involuntary care. And then Rob went and Jeremy Valeria went, well, we can do better than that. I've seen you talk about people on disabilities being in legislated poverty. I myself have been on disability for the last 9 years. It helped me a lot. I'm lucky enough to be working and disabled, but I have made sacrifices to give that up. I'm marrying my wife. She's coming in from the States. This is how I get her here and be with the love of my life. I'm planning on giving up my financial independence for that to happen. So I've been paying very close attention to what's happening with spousal clawbacks, which for any of you who don't know, if the government gives me money, if my finances are joined with, I can only make a certain amount of money before they start clawing it back. I think 21,000, 28,000. If that's tied to my wife, who makes a lot more than I do, then I lose all that money. And so spousal clawbacks, I know you guys have made a promise to try and end it. I would like to know, since it's become a little bit unclear with the information networks, where that's at, and if we will be facing the end of spousal clawbacks 2026.
Sure.
Yes.
That's all like podcasts, and there's my friends been sending me like crazy. I just want to make sure that's
Yeah.
okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a massive issue, and I appreciate the advocacy and raising it. And I'm going to do as politicians do and just take advantage of it and pivot a little bit, because there's something that Sonia Firstno said to me one day in the Green Caucus office, or she said to the whole team in exasperation as she was putting her hands on her head as we were arguing for the government to remove spousal clawbacks. And we're wondering why this so-called Social Democratic Party was so reluctant to remove a clawback that was punitive to people who wanted to live together but were not able to work or were on disability. And she said, if only they treated the billionaires with the same level of scrutiny as they treat people who are on disability or on income supplements. And so this is a nice connection with the campaign that you're on, and that is that the people who hoard and hoover up all of the resources, like as you pointed out, they say we're broke, but why? From the extraction that's been happening in this province has been all being collected in one very small place, or there's few very small places.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Back in the back yonder there, back 40. Dan.
Yeah, thanks. So, as they say, everyone may live in interesting times. And you got it in spades. Now, like a lot of people in this room, I'm retired and glad of it, because I would hate to be in the workforce these days with the forces going against so many workers. So there's a long list. Anybody here could go down to the downs in BC that have been going down because local industry is going down. So a lot of these mill towns, there's many different things going on. So there's getting to be this collection, huge collection of people that are wondering what the hell they're gonna do tomorrow. And so I don't know what it's gonna coalesce into, but it's a lot of people and they have a lot of impact. And just like they say about every industry has the direct effects and then the nearby effects. So all those people that are gonna be looking for a job tomorrow, there's them, and then there's their neighbors, or and all of this. So I don't know what it looks like a little bit down the road, but there's a lot of people looking for an answer to some sort.
The crisis of today, the collapse of forestry, these boom and bust industries that, are leaving so many workers behind. And then we have the broader seismic collapse of our labor force with AI that's very much on the horizon. And so we need to get pretty sharp serious about what we're doing with labor. What is our labor strategy in this province? And speaking specifically to industries like forestry, we let the strip the forest, strip the land, and it's leaving workers behind. You know, they're taking the profits and they're leaving. And so it's been inspiring to see unions, you know, work with local ecology groups to try to figure out, you know, a forestry industry that actually lasts, that flips the equation of low labor, high wood output onto its head and actually brings in, you know, a stronger workforce to create more diverse wood products. So yeah, there's so many examples like that. I was mentioning thinning and community managed forests by nations and or municipalities. And yeah, I'm also very interested, you know, when we hear about things like, you know, 100 Mile or the Crofton Mill closing, things like expropriating those closed mills and having workers actually, you know, take over those industries and support, you know, supported by government funds to build a truly sustainable industry. So there's loads of examples like that, but I'm actually curious what Adam has to say.
Oh, well, I think part of the reason why we have a government that continues with the extraction at the, you know, annual allowable cuts greater than what they should be, moving towards LNG, which is, you know, going backwards. And it is simply because of the wicked problem that we're facing. It's not just the displacement of blue collar jobs, as Emily's saying, it's the displacement of white collar jobs now as well. It was just 20 minutes ago that they were saying in the BC education system, take coding. You know, they just bought enough computers in school district 63 to teach all our kids coding, which actually they didn't. They're all computers that you can't code really. But coding was the thing, even when even when I was in the legislature.
Not long
A whole year ago. Right, but now I was just listening to a podcast talking about the collapse of white collar jobs in coding because that's been replaced. So it's a wicked problem, and it would, I mean, it's a problem that this current government has failed to be able to answer. It's a problem that the official opposition and other opposition parties have failed to come up with a solution for. And it's not just here in British Columbia, it's across the country and it is across the globe. And I think that where you're going with your answer is absolutely right. And that is, in fact, it reminds me of a comment that my dad's here tonight, folks. He probably didn't want me to point him out, but he's right over there. That he pointed out to me about the Saanich Inlet, which was, you know, when did we stop managing the Saanich Inlet? Well, when somebody way over there in Ottawa thought they could do a better job than what we could do locally. And the same thing goes with the local economies. These mills, those sites are resources that can be turned in to a beneficial industry for the community. And they need to be able to get together and empowered to be able to do that, work with their local governments to be able to rezone them to make sure that they work for what the people in the communities need. And it's not too long ago, it's only about 100 years ago, that all those forestry companies were family-run businesses that were investing directly into their communities. And that's the way the model works best. And I think that a lot of communities in the province, that's going to be the answer for them. Exactly what that industry is, no idea. And what we need is a provincial government, I think, and a leader that sees the potential in people and then enables them to be able to go out and figure out what that is for the small towns, for the neighborhoods that need it. I'm gonna go right here and then we'll come up to the front. Purple shirt, purple, yeah.
Alright, my question's around housing. I keep hearing the spin word affordable. And what I've, from my personal experiences, I'm seeing is that houses have gone up like double, triple in value in the last 3 years. Rents have doubled or tripled in some cases. And I'm looking at where the average income has not changed. So anybody basically makes 80,000 under, the house that they say is affordable is actually not affordable. So what is the Green Party doing to help change that?
Yeah, it is maddening, this sort of buzzword of affordable housing because, you know, in the NDP's strategy, they'll get a luxury developer to build a big condo, and then they'll say it's affordable because 5% of the units are below market. What's below market? Maybe 5 to 10%. An impossible market for people of our salaries. And yeah, so I think we need to look at affordable housing by income. And I forget what organization put this out, but you know, they've set a pretty universal definition for affordable housing, meaning your rent shouldn't be more than 30% of your monthly income. Even that, I think that's a little
CMHC.
high. Yeah, thank you.
In our local community, our CRD housing has actually changed their model. They're no longer doing subsidized housing, which would be the 30%.
Yeah.
They're switching it to affordable housing, which means it's only 20% below market value for our area, which also has financial criteria attached to it. So if you make between, you know, say 60 and 80,000, you can get a 2-bedroom townhouse at 10 or 20% below market value. Well, for somebody who makes 60,000, that's still easily half their base, if not more.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at that going, well, how is what was supposed to be a service to help is now being taken away.
Yeah, and our housing strategy is laser focused on building social housing, non-market housing, housing that actually reflects that affordable definition of income. And so yeah, that's what we're pushing for. And yeah, it's so concerning to see that being clawed back across the province for more like market-based definitions, which is not affordable, as you said. But you know, we're also in the eviction capital of Canada. Partly because we don't have things like vacancy control, which is a form of rent control that would ensure that you know, landlords can't jack up the rent in between tenants. And that's been a huge runaway issue with the cost of rent for across the province. And so yeah, things like that would make those kind of increases illegal. But yeah, certainly we need to just be massively scaling social housing.
So you take a look at the population on Pandora Street in downtown Victoria, on East Hastings. The demographic is far older, and these are our seniors, our elders, who have been forced out of their homes because of exactly this. People who have lived a long time in their units get evicted, so that then the landlord can bring it up to the market rate, and so it's a really big problem. I just want to to the point about being laser focused on building on government being in the social housing part of the housing market. It's really critical. There is probably, you know, as you say, 30% of housing or 30% of your salary is so-called affordable. In the last 3 or 4 years, that's gone to about 50% of your annual salary. There are people at 70%. And this is like everything else in life needs to cost just the 30% that you have left. Puts people in really desperate situations. And when I was working on Bill 44, one of the things that really struck me was that there is in our society about 30% of the population that cannot and will not be able to afford market rent anywhere at, you know, depending on where they're at in their community. And so that's the number. 30 to 40% need support in order to get secure, affordable, attainable housing. That's the job of government right there, is to target and the supports to that demographic. Because what that does is it means that those folks are not struggling to compete in the market they can never afford with people who can marginally afford it. And if you start to, rather than view this as a problem that can be solved from the top down, which is what the BC NDP's policy is, trickle down housing economics. That's Tom Davidoff's philosophy. And you do it from trickle up, where you say, we're gonna as government do everything we can to support those who are not going to be able to afford a unit. then what that does is it relieves pressure all the way through the lower parts of that market. And which then helps the rest of the market doesn't necessarily need help, but it helps the part of the market that needs it, rather than assumes that just building more supply is gonna inadvertently create stock that people can afford. Sorry, yeah. Bill 44 took a month of my life. Okay. I'm gonna calm my nervous system down again. I got COVID at Bill 44. Yeah, and so there's a famous story in the BC Green Caucus that I was always afraid of long COVID, COVID taking my ability to think and my ability to speak and my ability. What COVID did was it made me insane. And the housing policy came in at that exact time, and I was at home in my home office by myself with just housing policy. Yeah.
But I did have something I wanted to say, now I want to say something else about housing. But the first thing, I kind of want to say to this room, because we're somewhat in the same boat perhaps. And it's on the issue of straight talk. Because I've got 3 sons, I'm pretty sure none of them vote and none of them are political, and it's because they're so angry and frustrated. And so I strongly feel that, in fact, I texted one of my sons with the down with oligarchs, dump the oligarchs hat, and said he thinks Greens are too liberal. I don't, but yeah, I think some straight talk is definitely called for. It's definitely gonna be needed. There's a lot of angry and frustrated young folks out there. I know some of them.
Yeah, anecdotally, I think it's been very interesting to see some young people come over to the Greens who actually voted conservative and were a first-time
And
voter.
Frustrated vote, they are.
That, exactly, and it wasn't because they're conservative to the core, they have a malleable political landscape and want someone who speaks to them. And I think Rustad, for all his failures, really spoke to the working class and spoke to angry young men incredibly effectively in the last election. And they have the wrong solutions, but it felt like they were speaking the truth. They were talking about youth unemployment, and they had a bigger megaphone than us. So it's about now strategizing on our megaphone and how are we going to reach these people and bring them along.
There's, yeah, and I'll just say this. I inherited my parents' political party thing. That's gone, that's a thing of the past. We're not handing down as inheritances how you vote like we used to, I was born in a progressive conservative family. I'm gonna vote for a progressive conservative candidate. Social media has really, taken a sledgehammer to that part of our society. And so people are looking for a place to land, and it doesn't matter on the political spectrum. They're looking for the people who are saying what they want to hear.
Well, and truth.
Yeah.
And truth,
They're
yeah.
finding truth very hard to find. And that's the knock against liberals. The liberals have become associated with mealy mouth answers to everything. That frustrate the young folk.
If they want me to repeat the questions for being on, I didn't realize we were online. So has everything been okay so far? Have I said anything that,
We'll find out tomorrow.
yeah. Anyway, the comment was about liberals. Any other questions? Yeah, come on.
I think Glenn had her.
Oh,
hand
Glenn.
up first. You had your hand up, Glenn, right?
Yeah, well, most of it's lost now, but what little I can recall. Adam was talking about local control, is in reference to Sandwich Implant, is one thing. And what the further away leverages of power politically do. And it strikes me that they all want the power, but the further away you get, the less they want to usefully do about it. It's just the power that they want. And the problem, one of the problems, sort of only marginally connected to this, is that given what's happening with climate change, it's going to be more and more difficult to find solutions that do mitigate the increase in GHGs, do store and sequester the carbon. And it's going to be very difficult also. Say we do manage to bring down the oligarchs somewhat. Say we do manage to get their taxes, money, and they don't all move away as they claim they would. Then transferring that money to ordinary folks is going to be very difficult, because we have to employ a whole bunch of new technologies so that all the infrastructure that we build in the process of equalizing things, whether it's housing or whatever, does not involve massive GHGs. And we also have to remember in housing that to a certain extent, one of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure that we really do work from the bottom up. And that means, to some extent, making rules that, in a sense, prioritize those who have been in the province for a while. And that's going to be very difficult, because we have to fight charges that were being unfair to other Canadians or whoever. And I don't trust any of the other parties to even think about that. But I think that it's quite possible that you have the sort of mindset, and so do Rob and Jeremy, to actually take all that into account, do the best they can.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to summarize that into, sorry, online.
For those online. Yeah, well, taking the first chunk of that is, how is fighting the oligarchs a climate strategy? How will that actually translate into real emissions reductions? And I think partly it's because, you know, when you zoom out, you see that our climate policy is constantly sidelined when a new big project comes knocking, when a new industry wants to, you know, ram down another pipeline. So I think we need to have a broader conversation about ownership and, you know, who owns these industries. And, you know, first off, it's about obviously winding down the polluting industries that are extracting so much. And, you know, we can start to achieve that by, you know, first of all, not approving their permits, and then you know, taxing them effectively. These companies aren't paying their fair share. They're not paying adequate royalties. And so with that, those funds, you know, we can do things like a massive youth climate corps that would give anyone under the age of 35 a good green job if they wanted to. And it would be, you know, in sort of all sorts of diverse workplaces, like retrofits to scale the kind of renewables that we need to meet our electricity needs. Like, you know, we've been importing a lot from California, actually, through hydro transmission lines. And so it would obviously look like renewables like wind and solar, potentially geothermal. But, you know, it also looks like a conservation economy, and employing people to do the kind of remediation work that we need to heal the lands. And yeah, I also think of jobs like, what if we saw the care economy, like nursing and teaching as part of our just transition plan. You know, artists and teachers and nurses, that's not taking up much carbon. And we certainly starve the hell out of their wages. And as a result, we have, you know, a crumbling healthcare and education system. So I think as part of our just transition plan, you know, we need to look, it's about values and what we choose to invest in. And obviously that starts with these resource tycoons effectively.
Well, yeah. No, I'm gonna go to the Bob here, Lynn, thank you.
And I've got to get to Salt Spring, so
Right on.
but I can't leave without knowing about electoral reform. So tell me what's happening, or Rob can help out, whatever.
Like what's currently happening in the ledge.
Yep.
Yeah, Rob, do you want to give a little
Sure.
spin through an update?
Yes.
Favorite topic.
Yes.
So this is my favorite topic. So the report's being released and the recommendation is for a citizens assembly. And in the report itself, which is an all-party report, there's a clear set of indicators around what the terms of reference would look like. And so now the heavy lifting happens where we're in negotiations with the NDP, and I can't tell you what's happening there. I'd have to kill you. And then
Non-violence is part of it.
non-violence. But
And you lose a vote.
yeah,
it's-
that's right. But the you know, the other thing that was really helpful was the Ecos poll, where 65% of British Columbians want to see the number of seats proportionate to the vote, and then follow-up questions that demonstrated that that was across party lines. And so that really reinforced the message that the type of overwhelming response we in the special committee tour and so on and submissions wasn't a one-off, that actually there's strong support for doing this. And as Andrew Coyne has pointed out in his book, you know, it's really a political decision. And so that's what we're working on doing, you know, just making the case that it's good politics to get on with having the citizens assembly and making sure that the government would implement the results of the citizens assembly. So that's where it's at. You know, you'll have a better idea of where things land when we get to sort of the beginning of the spring session, because that's the moment of truth in terms of what happens with Carga. The only other thing I'd say is, and this is a non-social media strategy, but it did work pretty well, which was that Andrew Coyne wrote this great book on the crisis in democracy. And he had a whole chapter on proportional representation. And so, so I bought 13 copies of the book. I gave one to the premier, one to the deputy premier, one to everybody on the committee, and then we had a quiz. And so I just turned it into something that, and I said that, you know, you don't have to read the whole book, just chapter 7 on programming. Anyway, so I mean, I've right from the beginning, long answer to a short question, but right from the beginning, I've always, you know, I've always our success by getting it on the radar, and at each step of the way, working hard with a lot of support from a lot of people to make sure that there's an open possibility. You know, I mean, what are the odds right now? Probably 50-50, but that's way better than 10-90. And then, you know, next spring we'll see.
There's a point of advocacy though, for everybody here who's interested in advocating for this and building them. And that is that all of the members of that committee, these are consensus reports.
Yeah.
Is that right? So going forward, all of the political parties that participated in that all-party committee agreed to be where we're at right now. And that's a really important place to build the next stage of this from, is that they agreed to do a citizens assembly. And so we can do that in a nonpartisan way across the legislature.
Yeah, and that was that's a great point, and that's the beauty of an all-party committee. Cause that recommendation isn't just, you know, the NDP, it's across party. And everybody signed off on that, so.
Thanks, Rob.
Good job. Good to see you. Say hi to Salt Spring for us. There's a petition back there for you to sign for proportional representation if you want.
And happy belated birthday, Tom.
Always tough.
Thank you very much.
It's a round number, I heard, so. Yeah. Sweet, go.
On housing, land is a huge part of the issue, I think. And everybody knows this, I'm not saying anything new, I'm just putting it out again. And being new for people in this room, I think. The developers aren't building what is needed, at various times in various countries and in Canada, for example, after the Second World War. Housing was built that was little garden communities with central spaces and small houses and neighborhood building, and we need to get a lot closer to that sort of model. And one of the huge obstacles is the price of land and the availability of land near where the jobs are. So I think it's a problem that needs to be looked at a little bit from land up, and definitely the answers aren't out there in the billionaire community, I don't think.
Yeah.
And it is, when you said, I don't know what industry these towns can build. Well, clever little houses that work around the coding to produce actually inexpensive housing with our wood and our resources and our electricity, and then we just gotta get the land to put them on.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, we got just a couple more minutes, so we'll go, we got 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up.
I was wondering if there's been any information from groups that are using existing housing rather than trying to raise new emissions and more money by building new housing all the time and taking up land. There's a group, for instance, in Montreal called Radical Rest Homes that works with existing neighborhoods to make them more livable because they've been either abandoned or outgrown or just out of fashion.
There's
Yeah, no, if anyone here knows of groups like that, I'd certainly like to talk to them. Is that hand back there from you, Tito?
I mean, yeah, I'm part of the board of Gallium Affordable Living Institute, where we're trying to build a foothill forest home to get more housing, but we looking for money. We're waiting for the money to come in so that we can start building. It's
Yeah.
all ready to go.
Totally. And I'm also really interested in, working with municipalities to, remove barriers to things like tiny homes, if you have the space for it on existing property. And, supporting, I know in Saanich and in other municipalities, there's historically been bylaw barriers to secondary suites and, even limits on the number of roommates, despite, if there's, the correct number of bedrooms and, all aspects like that, we really need to modernize and update those bylaws and work with municipalities.
There's 2 ideas. They're free.
Yeah.
One, Salt Spring Island. They've got a ton of these, well, not a ton, but they got always on the market, there's these large houses that could be purchased. One of the issues is rezoning on Salt Spring and getting water hookups. Well, when you've got a water hookup, how do you use that? And I think Salt Spring could be repurposing some of these larger houses into multi-families. They could strata them, they could rent them. Like there's a bunch of different tenures that you could put in those buildings. And with the same idea in the city here, there's any number of buildings that are currently in the process. So somewhere in that development pipeline, either from approval to construction, and even after it's constructed, it's not too late for the government to step in. And I said to Ravi Kalin, when he was the Minister of Housing, I said, there's all of these condos that are being built right now that are spec, that are gonna be built for somebody that they don't know. And the government could be coming in and purchasing some of these units in every one of these buildings and using those as the social housing. They could be working with municipalities to increase the density on that land, create a couple more floors and use that in the pro forma to be building and then using nonprofit housing societies to run and manage those units as you would as a co-op or as a rental or, you know, whatever it is. So there's ways to use housing stock that's already being built or that already exists creatively, and absolutely. We'll go one more question here okay, 2 more questions and that's it. We'll go back to Tito and then.
Oh,
Really quick, Tito.
okay, I'll do my best. I wanted to speak
I'll help.
on someone who's talked about her sons thinking that the Greens are too liberal. I wanted to corroborate that. I have seen that discontent of the Greens not having enough teeth in the game in that regard, and I think there's been a real frustration with all the parties in BC being pushed rightward. And I'm wondering, I myself had little to no faith. I was sure Jonathan was gonna win. He got 34%, you got it like 60%. And it is my worry that element might hold us back from finally getting, fixing our crumbling province. I wonder if you can talk to where you feel the party really does have your back in jumpstarting these initiatives.
That was a good question.
Do you have my back? For the party, yeah, no, I feel very well supported. I feel like, you know, even thinking about endorsers of Jonathan's campaign, like Adrienne Carr, you know, she helped co-found the party in the 80s, and you know, she came rushing to my door asking how can she support, how can she mentor. And so, you know, I've seen so many examples like that of people from different generations who were undecided or supporting a different campaign really like rally behind me in these past few months. And I think it's an inspiring show of who Greens are, and we're a party of unity, and we're a party that, you know, we because we have so many shared values, we realize, you know, that is more important than the person. It's about the cause.
Excellent. It's
So Emily, you've been to 20 communities on this trip around the province. I wonder if you've had a chance to interact with the Tourism Association of British Columbia, because the last time I looked, they were several times the size of the forest industry. And yet they depend on the forest industry not succeeding in what they've been doing for the last 60 years. And I have been in touch with them several times and never can get a rise out of them. Like, folks, you need to defend your turf here because it's a huge economic generator for the province.
Yeah, I'm always trying to think of wedges like that. And I think ecotourism is a really interesting industry and a partner to engage with. I've talked to more like individuals that are involved in the tourism industry across BC. But yeah, they're on my list for sure. And there's definite parallels to be drawn with the LNG industry, because I think there's a real sort of splinter to drive, because they are sucking up so many billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies and electricity that could be going to electrify alternative industries, other communities, you know, across BC. So I think making that choice point and that opportunity cost clear is a really great way to sort of form a relationship and sort of forge some common ground.
one of the organizations that I was invited to participate in after I retired from politics was the Unlikely Allies, which was a group that caught my attention. The Unlikely Allies is the Guide Outfitters Association of BC and the Bear Viewing Association of BC and Raincoast and Skeena and me and Mike Morris, former BC Liberal, BC United MLA, right? And people who, and it made me, when I was invited to it, really emotional, because I was sitting in this room and realizing how different we all were, but yet how nature And the well-being of nature was key to every one of our livelihoods and who we were as people. But yet we had very wildly divergent opinions, like so, yeah, I think it is possible, and there are those crossovers for sure. Oh, oh my goodness, everyone wants to stay.
Bad moderator.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, we just wanted to add in.
Might be a
Two more, here we go, two more. No one's left yet, so. Okay.
Okay.
So exasperated, yeah, they have. Go.
One of the write-ups that were about Goldstream and what I'm doing down there made it all the way to the newspapers in Ontario. And you're talking about tourism, not too long after, 3 busloads of people from Ontario got to Goldstream just to see what Goldstream really would really look like. And so there's an interest there. And around tourism about what we have here is really important. And getting to young people, that's what Goldstream has been doing. A number of the high schools doing programs around nature, around what's happening at Goldstream has been a really big draw to students that will be able to vote in the next election. They are there, it's just reaching out to them.
Awesome.
Well, I was wondering, Mr. Olson, in British Columbia, one can send a free postcard to the members of the legislation assembly, like in the federals. Why don't we all just beg the other ones to cross the floor? I mean.
I'm trying.
Join Rob, maybe you get a great seat next to one BC.
The invitation is always open to the other parties. Make your case.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming this evening, and do you have any closing comments? I have some closing comments after that I've been asked to say, but how about you?
I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. This was such a spirited discussion. Yeah, give yourself a round of applause. And I also want to just highlight the other member of my wonderful team, Natalie, who heads up the field team here. And there's also Andrew in the back who helps us with so many things across the party, like the website and IT. But Natalie is our point person for all things field and riding association. So, this is going to be our best election yet. I'm doggedly determined to make that true, and Natalie is right there with me to make it happen. And we need all of you. We need your grandchildren as well. Get your grandchildren here. Why aren't your grandchildren here? And children, and and your neighbors and your dogs and everyone. So yeah, Natalie is set up here, so please sign up to be a part of the riding association. And yeah, we're gonna, start off some training in the new year, so we're up and ready for a possible snap election.
Oh, good.
Yeah, exciting, snap election, everyone's like, yay. 9 elections in 3 years, it's awesome. Thank you all for coming out, and thank you all for your continued and ongoing support. And of course, we're getting to the end of the year, and it wouldn't be a Green Party event if I didn't hold a Dutch auction. No, I'm just kidding. But as you are receiving the requests, or if you can make a year-end contribution to the BC Greens, they would be very grateful, and it will help fund more events just like this to be able to take over community spaces in a kind way, take them over, and have good conversation, have good engaging conversation. And to build the momentum that Emily and Rob and Jeremy and all of the others need in order to achieve what you're talking about. Thank you, Emily, for coming to Saanich North and the Islands.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. Have a good evening. Drive safely.
Oh, no. I thought I was like,